I had one chip left, then beat the pros for millions.
All in.
Ooh. Hello.
I have diamonds, not hearts. Just red.
There you go. Pretty easy for George Holmes. After the flop, the courage came pre-flop.
The home game heroes back in business.
Imagine being down to your last chip. Not a metaphor, not a figure of speech. Literally one chip, one shot, one breath away from being eliminated. Most players would accept their fate, fold, walk away, but not George Holmes. A 4-9-year-old recreational player from Atlanta with no pro sponsorship, no media hype, and no real expectation except one, to survive. What followed wasn't just a comeback. It was a defiance of poker gravity, an eruption of raw instinct against a sea of sharks. This is the untold story of how one man turned one chip into millions and nearly stole the crown from the pros. George Holmes is a recreational poker player from Atlanta, Georgia, who rose to fame with an extraordinary run in the 2021 World Series of Poker, WSOP Main Event. Originally from New Jersey, Holmes had been playing in home games since 1999, but had little exposure to the professional tournament circuit. His only recorded live tournament cash before 2021 was a modest $50,855 for finishing 213th in the 2019 WSOP Main Event. Despite his limited tournament experience, Holmes stunned the poker world by making it to heads-up play in the 2021 WSOP Main Event, ultimately finishing second to Koray Aldemir. Holmes' performance in the 2021 WSOP was nothing short of legendary. At one point during Day 7, he was down to just over one big blind, yet he mounted a dramatic comeback, building his chip stack to over $68 million and securing a spot at the final table. His fearless and aggressive style captivated fans, and his runner-up finish earned him a staggering $4.3 million, the largest cash prize of his career. With these total live earnings, Holmes is now ranked among the top 600 players on the all-time money list. Now, let's dive into the remarkable tale of how a local hero engineered the most astonishing tournament comeback in WSOP history. George Holmes found himself down to a single big blind. You might remember the moment when Ark picked up a straight draw on the turn. At that point, an 8 or a 10 would have sent Holmes packing. But the river brought a 6 instead, giving Holmes 2 pairs. With just one chip left, he managed to stay in the game. Defying the odds, Holmes tripled his stack, though he remained critically short-stacked. Most players in his position would have taken a cautious approach, aiming to climb the payout ladder. But George Holmes wasn't like most players. Having stared elimination in the face and survived, he now played fearlessly, as though he had nothing to lose. Over the next 90 minutes, Holmes delivered a performance so extraordinary that it left commentators and opponents at the table utterly in awe. The casual poker hero was in the midst of a miraculous run, turning heads and emerging as a real contender, but his defining moment still lay ahead. As the final table drew near, George Holmes was suddenly locked in a huge pot with one of the game's most feared opponents, Chance Kornuth, a high-stakes professional boasting more than $21 million in live tournament winnings and 4 WSOP bracelets on his resume. George Holmes is the star of the main event. No need to be a professional player, never give up, because anything is possible. Yes, pocket aces are possible, and Holmes has them now. He watches as Chance Kornuth opens the pot under the gun with a raise to $1.2 million, holding ace-king. Holmes, the amateur who has climbed from just 475,000 chips earlier on Day 7 to an impressive $34 million, decides to 3-bet with his aces. Now it's back to the aggressive Kornuth, a player known for testing opponents on every street. The question is whether Kornuth will recognize the danger this time. Earlier in Day 7, Kornuth flopped a flush with ace-queen suited against pocket aces, beating Denis Pridvor. And here we go, Kornuth moves all in with ace-king. Holmes doesn't hesitate for a moment. The legend of George Holmes grows even larger as Kornuth faces disaster. With 42 big blinds in his stack, Kornuth relies on his read but runs straight into one of the 2 hands that dominate him, pocket aces. The flop comes down, ace, 4, 6, and just like that, it's over. Chance Kornuth is drawing dead on the flop. After several eliminations, the field was down to 9, setting the stage for the final table and the chance to achieve an extraordinary comeback. Shortly afterward, he was dealt 2 queens and eliminated his first opponent, sending Gareth East out in 8th place. Without hesitation, he immediately focused on taking down another top professional in the following hand. The action folded around to Henry Park in the big blind, holding Jack 9. He had started day 7 as the chip leader with 29 million chips, but had been running cold in terms of playable hands. Interestingly, Park first learned poker while stationed on a Navy ship during his time in the Marines. Playing at the Rio is definitely more stable, those tables don't rock with the waves. Park decides to call. The flop comes out. Henry hits top pair, while George Holmes picks up 2 more diamonds. Park checked, and Holmes, who rarely checks, faced a big decision. He bet 1.6 million. With Park now holding fewer than 20 big blinds after the flop, he was expected to commit his entire stack. It looked like a showdown was imminent. George Holmes versus Henry. Park surprised everyone by check-raising to 5 million instead of going all in. Holmes responded with a 3-bet to 14.4 million, essentially putting Park to the test for his tournament life. Park made the call, staking his championship dreams on a pair of 9s, while Holmes still hoped for a lucky draw. The turn card is the 5 of hearts. Now George Holmes needs an ace, a 5, or a diamond to eliminate Henry Park. The river card reveals a 3 of spades, sealing the hand. Holmes suffers a major blow, losing a significant portion of his stack. Now let's move to another dramatic hand. This time, rather than playing cautiously, George Holmes intensified his aggression, demonstrating boldness even against the chip leader, widely regarded as one of the top tournament players globally. Koray Aldemir first raised to 2 million with Queen 6 of diamonds. Yep, he's getting bold. Meanwhile, Oliver chose to fold, and Cecilmus also too. Holmes takes action with Queen 3 of hearts. After cashing in his first main event back in 2019, he's now 2 for 2. Here, Holmes gets aggressive with a weaker hand, firing a 3-bet to 4.8 million while holding positional advantage. His sneaky aggressive style is on full display. He's far more dynamic than meets the eye and has a knack for keeping opponents on edge. Lococo, sitting in the small blind with a suited ace and the second largest stack, opts to fold his hand. The focus shifts back to Aldemir, holding Queen 6 of diamonds, the strongest hand in this scenario. He calls for an additional 2.8 million, setting the stage for a showdown. The flop reveals 4, 7, and 8, all hearts. Holmes connects with a flush, instantly claiming the best hand. Aldemir chose to check, and Holmes didn't hesitate, betting 3 million without any theatrics. Holmes hopes Aldemir is holding a strong pocket pair that might compel him to continue. Aldemir, however, has a gut shot straight draw and decides to respond with a bold check raise, tossing in a purple 5 million chip. This unexpected move surprises everyone, as Aldemir rarely misreads a situation or makes such an error. Holmes, unfazed, calls the 5.6 million. The turn brings the ace of spades, and Aldemir checks once more. Holmes seizes the moment and goes all in, forcing Aldemir to fold. Holmes secures the victory. Both the commentators and audience are left stunned. A recreational player daring to 3-bet the chip leader with Queen 3 suited was far from the timid play of an amateur. Holmes demonstrated the courage of a man unafraid to face elimination head-on. Next up, let's continue to experience the indescribable emotions in the following match. George is currently in the big blind position. The action is on Henry Park, who kicked off day 7 with a strong move by raising to 2 million with 2 pocket 10s. Aldemir has decided to fold his hand. Similarly, Oliver also chose to fold after examining his 2 hole cards, and Cecilmus did the same. The blinds are currently set at $500,000 for the small blind and $1 million for the big blind. Holmes decides to enter the action, calling for $1 million, setting up a heads-up confrontation with Park. Park is still in a favorable situation with his 10s, especially now that he has a flush draw to enhance his hand. Holmes checks to Park, who is positioned roughly in the middle of the pack with 7 players remaining in the tournament. Park checks back, and another 7 appears on the turn, further solidifying Park's status as a significant favorite in this hand. It's puzzling why George Holmes is still involved in this pot. Personally, I would have opted to fold in the big blind position. If you frequently defend your big blind, you risk having no chips left to defend with. Holmes then makes a bold bet of 3.5 million. This is the surprising side of George Holmes. He has no pair, no draw, and seemingly no chance of winning. However, if he detects any sign of weakness from his opponent, he is quick to assert his strength. It seems that Park's decision to check the flop has worked out in his favor, as he likely hoped that Holmes would take a stab at the pot. Park responds with a call. Now, what's next, gentlemen? The river card has been revealed. It's the King of Hearts. Holmes' aggressive play was met with some hesitation on the turn. So, what happens now? It's a classic home game scenario. George Holmes is reaching deep into his stack, betting a hefty $27 million into a pot that only contains $12 million. Perhaps he's experiencing a momentary lapse in judgment, as if he mistakenly believes he's at a Kardashian undergarment auction. He's just wagered more than half of his remaining chips, with nothing to show for it. If Park calls, he would be left with only 24 big blinds. Holmes is sending a message to Park. If you choose to call and end up losing, you'll be left with just 8 big blinds. With 2 overcards on the board, a paired board, and 3 spades present, Holmes has decided to bet for $27 million. Ultimately, Park chooses to fold. George Holmes takes down the pot. It appears he is no longer merely surviving. He is actively outplaying some of the best professionals in the game. As the final table continued to shrink, Holmes found himself up against a familiar adversary in a critical situation, the very same player who had nearly dashed his hopes of victory in the main event on day 7. Jack Oliver swiftly went all in with his hole cards, an ace and an 8, albeit of different suits. This presented a challenging decision for George Holmes. He held a visually appealing hand, Queen-Jack suited, but with the risk of committing more than a third of his stack, he was uncertain if Queen-Jack suited was strong enough to warrant a call. If Holmes were to lose this hand, he would find himself as the short stack at the table. After some hesitation, he ultimately made the reluctant decision to call, which could only be described as a crying, sighing, and moaning call. Now, Oliver was once again at risk, and yet again, he held the better hand. Having faced similar situations before, Oliver was no stranger to this pressure. He managed to secure top pair, but this did not change George's requirements for winning the hand. The turn card came into play and the tension was palpable in the Amazon room as Holmes took the lead with a jack. Oliver was left with 5 outs to potentially save his position in the tournament. The river card revealed was a 9. Jack Oliver was officially eliminated from this main event. In the grand scheme of things, poker has a peculiar way of coming full circle. The irony was striking. The very man who had reduced Holmes to a mere 1 big blind was now eliminated by him in 3rd place. Holmes achieved the ultimate form of revenge and was now set for a heads-up battle for poker's most prestigious title. However, the story is not over. There was still one player standing between him and the coveted $8 million prize, along with a prestigious WSOP Main Event bracelet, Koray Aldemir, a top-tier German professional who seemed to have every advantage in this high-stakes game. However, there was one crucial element. He lacked a fearless, Mamba-like mentality that could turn the tide. Aldemir initiated the action with a raise, holding 7-3 of hearts. Meanwhile, Holmes had a 5-deuce in his hand. Holmes responded with a 3-bet to $9 million. It's important to remember that Holmes was not merely a casual home game player. He had previously found himself down to just 1 big blind. His comeback had been nothing short of epic, and there was no way he was going to fold at this point. If George was intent on playing for big pots, that was perfectly acceptable to the seasoned German pro, Koray Aldemir. Together, they had already built a substantial pot totaling $20 million. Now, the flop revealed the cards 10, 3, and 6. Incredibly, Koray had the best hand pre-flop and maintained that advantage post-flop with a pair of 3s. George, on the other hand, was left with a gut-shot straight draw. Holmes made a popular bet of $5 million, which was about 1/4 of the pot. Naturally, Aldemir continued to play aggressively from his strong position. Holmes, however, paired up, which gave him even more confidence to push his chips forward. Now, emboldened by his new pair, Holmes decided to bet $13 million. It was expected that he would fire again after hitting a pair. Aldemir's approach had been consistent and solid throughout this hand. He played steady poker, made reliable reads, and had also been running exceptionally well. He responded with a bet of $13 million. Koray Aldemir was not backing down. With $56 million now in the middle of the pot, the river card came down as the Ace of Diamonds. An ace is rarely a card that players welcome with open arms. This ace completed potential straights and flushes, adding to the tension. The beauty of heads-up play lies in the significance of every single action taken. Holmes was ready to make a statement, betting a hefty $40 million with a bold move. That was a substantial bet, a significant wager. It forced Aldemir to fold, as most of his chip lead was now in jeopardy. For hours, the two players engaged in a fierce battle, with the chip lead exchanging hands multiple times throughout the intense competition. Then came the most pivotal moment of the entire tournament. Holmes, with just one chip and one dream, was now only one hand away from achieving poker legend status. With 100 big blinds in play, the match had been exciting and fair. Holmes was on the button holding king-queen and raised to 6 million. Aldemir, holding 10 and 7 diamonds, faced a significant decision. The pot was now at 14.1 million, and Aldemir felt the pressure. Then the flop came, a 7, a 2, and a 10. Aldemir hit top 2 pair with his 7 and 10 and quickly checked. This flop was quite favorable for 10-7, ranking among the top 5 options. Holmes needed to keep betting, so he put in another 6 million. While it may not have been necessary, he wasn't one to back down easily. One reason for raising pre-flop is to safeguard your hand, but in heads-up play, all bets are off. Aldemir, now with 2 pair, 10 and 7, decided to check raise to 19 million. This move was to protect his hand against any potential draws Holmes might have. Typically, most players would fold in response to that check raise. However, George Holmes is different. He might even consider a 3-bet. True to form, he opted to call. The turn card was a king, improving Holmes' hand, but he was still at a disadvantage. He chose not to check, hoping that George had connected with the board. Aldemir then bet 36.5 million, intensifying the situation for Holmes. Holmes was now more than a 4-1 underdog, but decided to call. Aldemir gulped as Holmes pushed his chips in, bringing the pot to over 125 million. The river card was the 9 of clubs, a safe card for Aldemir, who still held the best hand with his 2 pair. Aldemir checked, and then Holmes declared, all in. He was ready to risk it all. If Koray called, it would be the end for Holmes. Aldemir made the call. Holmes revealed the king it wasn't enough. And yet, even in defeat, he had cemented something greater than a title. And that's a wrap on today's video. We appreciate you being here. If this video brought you value or entertainment, please show your support by liking and subscribing to the Poker King Strategy channel. We've got more expert breakdowns, legendary hands, and winning secrets coming your way every week. Don't miss out, hit the bell icon, and stay ahead of the game. Until next time, play smart and play bold.